Post-incident management brings the decon process full circle. There's more to concluding a decon procedure than just cleaning up. This training course will instruct you how to evaluate your response, ensure the safety of decon team members, and follow up with documentation. Post-incident management is just as critical to the overall success of your decontamination protocol as all of the other prior steps. After an emergency decontamination operation, focus needs to shift from victim care to post-incident management. The decon unit leader or their designee needs to ensure that the following steps are completed. The remainder of this course discusses each step in detail. Step 1. Follow up on the well-being of decon team members. Decon team members who are dressed in personal protective equipment or PPE are at the highest risk of injury or exposure due to the nature of the response. This risk increases depending upon the use, lack of use, or improper use and fit of PPE. Some chemicals pose a higher exposure risk than others, especially those that create a vapor hazard. These chemicals increase the risk of inhalation injury, especially if PPE is not properly worn. Heat exhaustion and dehydration are real possibilities when decontamination is performed in any kind of weather, and a hot and humid environment creates extreme risk. Actual failure of the chemical protective clothing or an incorrectly selected respirator or filter canister is another contributor to responder risk. As a result, each team member who wore PPE should be evaluated at the conclusion of the emergency decontamination operation. Certain clues help determine the degree of this evaluation. For example, tears in suits, team member complaints of skin or eye irritation, cough or shortness of breath dictate that a more complete evaluation be conducted. At a minimum, the vital signs of each team member dressed in PPE should be monitored both pre- and post-incident. If any evidence indicates there is an escalated risk to the responder, steps need to be taken to deal with that issue. These issues should first be addressed during the post-incident debriefing and continued on through the medical evaluation. Step 2. Critique the response. It is important to evaluate your team's response. At the conclusion of the operation, assemble the decon team to discuss what went well with the response and what can be improved. Now is a good time to review the hazardous material if known. The group should identify future training needs, put together a list of equipment that might need to be repaired or replaced, and discuss any procedural changes that would make the emergency decontamination operation safer and more efficient. Step 3. Clean up hospital decontamination zone. Cleanup of the hospital decontamination zone should not be considered emergent, yet it should be accomplished with the same level of safety and scrutiny as the original emergency decontamination operation. The hospital decontamination zone must remain secure until cleanup and disposal is complete and all equipment has been decontaminated and returned to storage or disposed of in proper containers. Local, regional, and national resources can be contacted to assist in the decision-making process. The first challenge is determining if the cleanup procedure can be handled internally or if an outside contractor needs to be called. To help make this decision, a few questions need to be answered. A critical question is, what was the contaminant? It is possible that the emergency decontamination operation was completed before positive identification of the contaminant was obtained. Every effort must be made to identify the material. Very important post-incident management considerations depend on being able to identify the material. Once the contaminant is identified, critical information can be obtained from a variety of sources, including safety data sheets, chemical databases, poison control, or local environmental officials, to determine if the hospital decontamination zone can be safely cleaned up by hospital personnel in the appropriate level of protection, or if an outside contractor needs to be notified. If the product cannot be identified, it is best to secure the area until a qualified environmental remediation expert can evaluate the site for cleanup and disposal requirements. The decision on whether there are special requirements for cleanup and disposal is a complicated one and must be made by qualified personnel. If your hospital has such a person on staff, they should be used. Otherwise, an outside contractor should be contacted. The regulations for environmental remediation are complicated and not intuitive. Therefore, it is not appropriate to assume that a material is not hazardous based on its acute effect on those exposed to undetermined concentrations. If the contaminant has been identified and is minimally hazardous, then hospital personnel may be able to wash the decon equipment while wearing splash protection. If you feel that higher levels of protection are needed to clean the equipment, then your hospital probably should not be doing the cleanup. Remember, you are forming a team to decontaminate patients, not to clean up hazardous waste. The employees forming the decon team are being taken from critical jobs in your facility, and it does not make sense to keep them from those jobs longer than absolutely necessary. There are professional environmental remediation teams on call in most areas. In fact, you should identify contact information for them in your emergency decontamination response plan. If the chemical is extremely hazardous, then it is absolutely necessary to call an outside spill cleanup contractor to complete the process. Hazardous material remediation requires a much higher level of training than you are going to provide your employees under this program. Another important question is whether water and soap will be effective in removing the contaminant from your equipment. If the answer is yes and you have determined that the contaminant is minimally hazardous, then hospital staff can easily remove the contaminants from equipment with soap and water. Chemicals that are not water-soluble may require additional decon solutions and more aggressive techniques than your employees are qualified to perform, and outside contractors will have to be called in. Some contaminants that are water-soluble and are approved for discharge into a sanitary sewer system may be flushed into the sewer. Contact your city's utility or public works department for rules on discharging materials into their system. All other contaminants and decon fluids must be recovered and disposed of by a licensed waste disposal facility in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. Personnel are often not readily available after the emergency decontamination operation because they must return to their normal duties. As a result, cleanup may be delayed, though the area needs to remain secure. If personnel and equipment are not available, then outside assistance such as spill cleanup or waste disposal contractors should be contacted. In addition, your regional poison control can provide technical information to your facility. In certain circumstances, the actual cost of cleanup can be recouped beyond patient billing through some state and federal mandates when there is a responsible party. Step 4. Repair and replace equipment. At the conclusion of the emergency decontamination operation, conduct a complete evaluation of all the equipment used. If damaged equipment can be repaired, assign specific individuals to oversee that task. If certain equipment cannot be repaired or cannot be decontaminated and returned to service, it should be disposed of properly and replaced. Institute a system to follow up to make sure these tasks are quickly accomplished. In most decon events, all used disposable gear needs to be replaced. Compile a complete list of this equipment and take steps to restock your response inventory. An individual should be assigned to make sure that all equipment is ready to use the next time it is needed. A complete written record of the emergency decontamination operation must be amassed. Forms can be developed to assist in documentation during the decon event so that an accurate timeline can be developed. Track the number of decon team members involved and their assigned tasks so that the risk to specific individuals can be evaluated. Staff safety is the #1 objective of a successful emergency decontamination operation. While all other procedures are patient-focused, the first rule of decontamination is to protect your staff and facility. Doing so will ensure that you don't create additional patients during the decon process, and it will keep you in line with federal or state regulations. In addition, a successful decontamination program requires ongoing training, exercise, evaluation, and updating. They will maintain security until the decon area is cleaned and deemed safe. A representative from security, like all team members, will report for debriefing after the EDO. Training is skill-specific and should include familiarity with the incident command model as well as with the various facets of the emergency decontamination operation. The contaminant identification position is responsible for evaluating available information to make determinations on the level of PPE and decontamination required. They should also utilize resources such as the Poison Control Center or WISER to learn about potential signs and symptoms of acute exposure, decon area cleanup needs, and proper waste disposal requirements. This individual should ideally have a medical, pharmacology, or hazmat background. The individual in the contaminant identification position will report potential exposure signs and symptoms during the debriefing. Training for this position should be skill-specific. The emergency decontamination team is not limited to these positions. As additional tasks are identified, the ICS can be expanded to accommodate those sectors. For example, in multiple casualty situations, a triage and safety officer should be designated as well as a scribe to document all activities. In radiological events, a radiation safety officer should be involved. Over time, the ICS model has developed and become the management backbone of most emergency response organizations, from local to federal agencies, civil service areas, and the private sector. ICS is a core component of the National Incident Management System, or NIMS. The objective of NIMS is to standardize the way all response organizations and hospitals approach incident command, preparedness, resource management, communications, and support technologies. The Hospital Incident Command System, or HICS, is the most common adaptation of the ICS to hospitals. Like Public Safety ICS, HICS utilizes a predictable command structure, common language, and responder accountability as its cornerstone. HICS not only helps hospitals respond efficiently inside the hospital, but also unifies the hospital with outside responders. With the establishment of NIMS, there is only one ICS. As hospitals and agencies continue to adopt the principles and concepts of ICS as established in the NIMS, the incident command system can expand to meet the needs of the response, regardless of the size or number of responders. The key to both NIMS and ICS is a balance between standardization and flexibility. During a hazardous materials incident, a hospital will typically implement their emergency operations plan and activate their decon team. It is important for you to be aware how your decon team fits into the overall HICS or other incident management system. ICS is a powerful tool that uses a predictable command structure, common language, and responder accountability to accomplish multiple tasks in a coordinated and efficient manner. Accomplishing tasks in the incident command system shifts from individuals to functional positions. In hospital decontamination, these positions include operations, suit support, equipment support, security, and contaminant identification. The decon unit leader coordinates and oversees all aspects of on-site patient decontamination and should have the authority and control over the entire decontamination operation. Using ICS allows you to improve communication both internally and externally to minimize confusion and disruption and promotes safety and efficiency during emergency decontamination operations.